lapped by him, and I would try to keep getting better, but it's just I kept getting lapped. And then I think a year went by, and then I really worked on racing and testing and all that. So I actually was racing him the next year. So it's like I went from being lapped to actually racing the best driver. So
Cool.
I for sure didn't have success at the start.
Um, what was your biggest challenge when you first got going?
Ooh, that's tough. I don't know. I think everyone can say there's always like the budget and all that
Sure.
stuff, but I think the hardest part, I guess, is being a female as well in racing because not everyone supports you the same and all that. But I don't know. There were a lot of challenges. Like, so I'm from the island, like Vancouver Island, so just off of Vancouver, and we had to take. I think we had to travel 6 hours every day to the go kart track, which was
Wow.
crazy. So it's like that was a big challenge for us, and we had to take the ferry, which is horrendous, and it's like really like pricey, and then we bought an RV, so it's even more expensive and all that. And I think the traveling was our biggest challenge because 6 hours to a go-kart track and you need to practice every weekend. It's just it was definitely a challenge.
And when you had that 6 hours, were you towing your go kart with you, or was it in the back of the van, or how did you make that whole thing work?
No, so we started actually how we started, my dad, we always just drove down in a car and stayed in a hotel, and the team actually had my go-kart.
Got it.
And then afterwards, we actually decided it would be good to buy our own go-kart, and we actually bought an RV, so like a little motorhome. Um, it's 24 feet for three people and a dog, so
Wow.
it's squishy. And what's the funniest part is we still have it for 5 years now, and we still now to this day we drive all the way from Vancouver Island all the way down to Buttonwillow, like
Nice.
California and stuff. And so we still use it. Like we tow stuff with it because it's just comfortable, instead of staying in hotels
Sure.
and it's so much work. And so we drive all the way down.
So was mom or dad mechanically inclined when you started this? Because sometimes we come from families that have been doing this for a long time, and we were born into it. And it sounds like you just had a dad or a mom who were F1 fans, and that's how you kind of learned about it, right?
Yeah, basically. My dad he wasn't really a fan. He just kind of enjoyed it. Like my mom remembers when her grandpa was actually watching F1 on the TV like years ago. And it's like, that was nice, but my parents weren't fans. They loved cars. They had nice cars, well, still have. And yes, my dad, when I was go karting, he was definitely big into mechanicking. He always worked on my go kart. Of course, we had other like coaches and stuff, but he still works on my car to this day, on the Formula 3, and he still changes tires. He helps a lot. Like, honestly, it's insane to see how much he supports me. Like, there is so much behind the scenes as well, like, marketing me, emails. Like, we send so many emails every single day. And my dad's so into it. And he has his own company, and he calls my company his second company.
Very
So,
nice.
and he loves it. He's just, I don't know, it's so funny to watch him. Like, he just, especially when something goes right, when there's something really like a big opportunity or something, he's just like so happy. Like, honestly, sometimes more happy than me. And it's nice to see how he's kind of growing with it and learning as well.
So do you have brothers or sisters?
Yes, I have a brother. But he is 33 years old. So
Okay.
but he supports me a lot. He was always into drifting. So
Oh, cool.
he does autocross. We go sometimes together. He takes he just got, actually, the other day, he just got the new manual Supra, which is
Oh.
like really crazy in Canada because I think there are like two of them in Canada.
Oh, cool.
So he just got it. So he's really happy.
So, what was the step up from carts to cars?
Oh, it's a good one. I was honestly, I don't want to say I was really lucky, but I got a really good opportunity with so Mercedes-Benz Canada one day calls my dad at work. And so, funny story, my dad had a really bad day at work, so he decided to put his legs up on the desk and just drink. He put some Baileys in his coffee, and it was a bad day. Like 2 jobs collided. It was not good. He was angry and all that. And so Mercedes-Benz Canada called him and said, "Hey, we want your daughter in a documentary." And my dad was like, "That's so funny," and he hung up. And then, and then, and then they emailed him. He was like, "Oh, whatever." And then they called him again, and they were like, and then my dad answered, and he was like, "Okay, what do you want?" And they're like, "We really want your daughter in a documentary." And that's how it all started. This filming crew followed me around in karting. They filmed everything, and then they filmed me. I did a GT4 race in Buttonwillow with an AMG GT4, and we did a 3-hour endurance race in the night. And that's how it started.
So you went from karting to an
Yes.
AMG GT4 car.
Yes, at 14 years old.
Did you even? I mean, obviously you had to figure out how to shift, right? That had to happen. Were you in shifter karts?
No, just junior and senior.
So you were in direct drive karts, and then your next step up was an AMG GT4 car. That is pretty hardcore.
Yeah. It was funny, and the funniest part is that so it was a 2-week period of time. So the first week we tested in the GT4 just to get familiar and all that stuff, and then it was a 3-week trip. So the first week we tested. The next week I decided, oh, we're in Buttonwillow, let's just do a Formula 4 test. So I actually tested in a Formula 4 car for 3 days the next week, and then the next week we did the endurance race. So it was a full week. So it was really fun.
So I guess my question is, why did Mercedes call you?
Because it was a documentary about 3 girls. Okay. So there was me, the youngest, and then there's the other girl was, I think she was 25 at the time, and then a 35-year-old.
Okay.
So they're all Canadian female racers, and they just wanted to do a documentary about female racers. And then I went from there. They filmed my Formula 3 experience and all these things, and winning and all the success. Like they filmed the W Series. I did W Series tests, so they got all that. And it should be released soon, the documentary. Well, now they call it a film, so it's a movie.
Okay.
I think it's going to be 90 minutes, so it'll be nice and long.
Very cool. Well, you'll have to let us know so that we can put that information in our show notes.
Definitely.
When that comes out and how we can see it and all that kind of stuff. So,
Sure.
so okay, you go from direct drive karts. When you sit in the AMG GT3 or 4 car the first time, what's going through your head?
I actually asked my dad before I got in. I was like, "Are you sure they trust me? Are you sure I should be doing this? Like, I'm 14. I don't have a driver's license. I don't have anything." Well, I have a racing license, an SCCA license that we applied for. And I got so used to the car. Like right when I sat in, I was of course nervous because I've never used the clutch before. And the Mercedes, you have to use the clutch to engage first gear and come to a stop. So it was a struggle, but I learned it. And then it was like I was born into it. It was so natural.
So was that a paddle shifter?
Yes.
Did you do any like sim racing in a paddle shifter GT car?
Yes, I for sure did at home before, so I'd be prepared.
How much did that help you?
A lot, tremendously. Like every day, like I was testing like crazy before Laguna. So Laguna is this weekend, so I was testing like crazy prior. So it helps a lot. Like honestly, just learning the track, learning the car, learning like what the limits are. Of course, you don't know, like it's not the same, but it's really, really similar.
And I suppose at age 14, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So was the first time ever with a clutch in that car, or did you do something with Dad around a parking lot at home before you got to the track the first time when you realized what you were getting yourself into?
Well, actually, we went in Vancouver, there's a track called Mission Raceway.
Okay.
And we actually rented it was a manual Miata. It was like a little car. That was my first ever with the whole manual with the stick and all that. It was interesting, but it went okay.
When I was a kid, they take you to the high school parking lot, and dad would pray that you didn't blow the clutch out when you were learning how to drive a stick shift. So,
Yeah.
that was always the excitement for us when we learned for the first time. But to go from karts to really never driving much of a car at
Yeah.
all to the first race car is not a Formula Ford, not a Spec Miata, not a Spec Racer Ford, not kind of the traditional next step up cars, right into that big heavy. And I mean the weight difference between the cart and the AMG Mercedes, it's got to be
Wait,
3,500 pounds.
it is heavy. You feel it like in the corners, like going from the GT4 to the Formula 4 is crazy. It
Yeah.
was like, yeah, it was very different.
Was there power steering in it?
Yes.
Okay, that certainly
Yeah.
helps. That,
Very, very helpful. ABS is nice.
oh
Traction
yeah.
control, very nice.
And then from there, what was the next step? Because I know now you're doing the F. Well, you start. I think you did F4, and now you're in F3, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I did only a little testing in F4, and then after the GT4 race, we decided that we would actually buy a Formula 3 because of the halo. Because the Formula 4s don't have halos right now, and we know that we would lose a lot of money if we bought a Formula 4, and
Right.
then we would try to resell it, right? Because no halo and all that.
Sure.
And so also the Formula 3, you have to like. I think we did a good thing because I think it was last year. We took all of last year to really test, like to really get to know the car and blah blah. Because it's a lot of power, and to go from like go karting straight to Formula 3 is a lot. And I think like even if you go from Formula 4 to Formula 3, it's a big step, like to really get used to the power. And I think we did good, like just to go straight to Formula 3. And I don't know, that's at least what I think we did good. And I'm having fun in Formula 3, and that was actually my step. I just skipped Formula 4. I didn't race Formula 4 at all. I just went straight to Formula 3.
Right. 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 Well, and I suppose it wasn't as big of a deal because of the time you spent in the Mercedes. That the power difference obviously was dramatic between the 4 and the 3, but you'd had that time in that big, heavy, fast car that
Yeah,
it didn't really surprise you as much as it might have. I think probably your bigger problem would have been to figure out when to hit the brakes, and
yeah,
when to turn in, because there's nothing. The Formula 3 car would be much closer to a kart than the Mercedes. That probably was your bigger learning curve of what would be an enormous
yeah,
learning curve, right?
yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting though because the GT4 is really it's like the same speed as the Formula 4. So you're basically it's very very similar. And then when you get to the GT3, that's the same as the Formula 3. So it's of course getting used to the weight of the GT4 is like crazy, like carrying speed. Like I think you carry twice as much speed in corners with a Formula car than a sports car. So
Yeah.
it's very different.
So I first came across you at Buttonwillow. Um, were you at Buttonwillow last year? Because I know I saw you won
Yeah,
both of the races this year, I think, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
I first saw you last year, and I noticed that um, it shouldn't be this way, but when I see a lady on the entry form, it piques my interest. I'm the father of a young daughter, and so I take notice, and I saw you doing your thing, and you had a good weekend, but it wasn't anything spectacular. And then this year you came and you won both races, and I'm like, okay, what's
yeah,
happened? Let's talk a little bit about this. Um,
yeah.
what's the learning been just from last year to this year?
A lot of testing, and
Yeah.
that's what it's been. Just a lot in the heat, getting to know what the tires do. Just learning, all the power, like when you can actually get on throttle, where the grip is. The aero is huge, like the aerodynamics. It's like you think about that if you're oversteering, that you have to lift off the throttle. That's what you always think. But with an aerodynamic car, you want to actually get on throttle because the car will start squatting on.
Right.
So it's learning these things, and yeah, it's a lot of time spent in that car, but it's always good to test a lot.
Um, is that testing program part of your sponsorship deal?
Uh, sorta, sorta. We're sponsored with a sum of money, and we can choose to do whatever we want to do.
Got it.
So
Got it.
yeah.
And so, which series are you doing this year?
So currently, I'm doing the Formula Pro USA series, which is the West Coast for Formula 3. And then hopefully we'll get to do some on the East Coast as well. So Formula Regional Americas, which is the bigger series. And also we're hoping, last year we did the Indian Racing League Championship.
Right.
And hopefully we're going to do that this year as well. They're thinking about it. And hopefully we'll go to India again for 5 weeks. So that would be a lot of racing.
Well, that brings me to my next question. Obviously, not obviously, but we talked earlier, and you mentioned that you have international racing aspirations, but they're not really aspirations because you've already done it.
Yeah.
You went to India. You raced in their series for 5 or 6 weeks. Tell me about that.
That was crazy. I was not expecting that. So how it happened, they obviously just called up and asked if we wanted to be part of it. And I was kind of skeptical, honestly, like thinking about like, going to India, like it's a different country, and I didn't know racing was big there. And but when we got there, it was really cool actually to meet the drivers there. So they had Le Mans race winner drivers, Porsche factory drivers, Red Bull factory drivers, all these really, really good drivers. And they also brought 6 girls and 6 international drivers, and then 6 local drivers. So
Okay.
there was a mix of everything, and I had to share a car with another guy, and so we had to do a driver change in the second race. And so it was like a 30-minute race, and then we did driver change, and then it was really, really cool, like to meet all the people. We raced on the Formula E track in Hyderabad. It was a street circuit, and it was cool, like for 5 weeks to be with those people, and it was cool learning.
And what were you racing? What was the cars that you were racing in India?
It was a Wolf GP08. It's an open wheel car.
Okay.
Well, actually, it's an open cockpit car, but closed wheels.
So kind
it's
of
like a prototype.
like a
sorta.
prototype. Okay.
Yeah, sorta. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And was it a series of races, or was it one race that you went and did?
No, it was 5 weekends.
Okay.
Well, 5 weeks, and then 5 weekends. So we did, what is that? 15 races.
Sure.
or something.
And how did you do?
So I got 11 out of 29 drivers.
Okay.
So it was really good, especially my first year in racing cars. So
Okay.
it's actually really good.
So I understand the difficulties it is for women having opportunities to race here in the States and in Europe. How were you accepted in India?
It was actually really interesting because all the spectators that came wanted to take pictures with me and with all the other girls. And it was because it's so shocking for them to see girls in the sport. And it's very nice to see, and, it's, I don't try to pay attention to, like, the whole thing with women in motorsports
Right.
and all that stuff. Like, what I always say is, you put your helmet on, doesn't matter what gender you are.
Right.
It really doesn't. Like, it's you in the car, and I think a lot of people sometimes, like, judge that and all
Sure.
that and talk about it a lot. But I think, it's great being a woman in the sport. You got a lot of supporters. Like, my main sponsor, well, one of my sponsors from Canada, he supports me because I'm a woman in motorsports. So that's basically why he supports me, and he wants to see me
Yeah.
be the first woman in Formula One. So
That would be fantastic, wouldn't it?
yeah, it would be really nice.
Every time I've had a woman on the show, and we've sometimes we talk about this, sometimes we don't. The answer that you gave is fairly similar to everyone else. You don't want to be judged as a woman race car driver. You want to be judged as a race car driver. It is hard to get around, though, that is part of what the narrative is. But everyone I have talked to, though, does um, really smile from ear to ear when I ask them about what's it like when a young girl walks up to you and doesn't and is like shocked or interested or intrigued or, has that kind of hero look in their eye, like looking at you and saying, I'd love to be able to do something amazing, maybe be a race car driver.
Yeah, it's honestly really nice. Like, I got it a lot, like, when I go back to the kart track. Like, when I started karting, there were not many girls at the track because that was a while ago and it wasn't too big, and, Formula One wasn't too big. And, I go back to the kart track now and, like, I see so many young girls, like, trying to get into the sport and, also watching their brothers racing, and I'm like, you should go try it. Like, it's fun. Like, you can make it there too. Like, all the girls sometimes think like, oh, it's just for guys, like the sport, and it's not. Like, some girls come by our garages and they're always like, oh, that's so cool. Like, it's really nice to see that, and I think like we do need more women in the sport for sure, and especially younger ones too. So yeah, it's nice to see the younger girls coming around.
All right, so F1 is the goal.
Yeah.
That takes some stuff. It takes some
Yeah.
money. It takes some experience. It takes some luck. A lot of different things. Obviously, it takes going to Europe. How old are you?
17.
17. High school graduate yet? Yes or no?
No, that's
Okay.
next year.
Next year. Okay. So, what is the plan to get to Europe? How's that going to work out for you?
We're definitely working on it. Got some interesting plans possibly for next year. I can't say much. If something goes through, that would be amazing. Of course, there's always budget,
Of course.
and I think that's what we work on so much, especially my dad. Emails after emails, like contacting, like you have to have the right connections in the sport to make it somewhere. Like, we go to a track and just you have to talk to everyone, and like because some of them can get you somewhere, right? Like the right connection can really get you somewhere, and I think it's very doable to go to Europe. Hopefully, next year would be really cool. Otherwise, next year we're planning on doing Formula Regional Americas, the whole championship, and if we win that championship, we can go to Super Formula, which is in Japan,
Okay.
which is basically like Formula 2, so a little higher than Formula 2. So that would be really, really cool.
Right.
So there are a lot of plans, but just gotta, pick what I want to do, of course.
So now in the U.S. we have the the name escapes me, but it's basically the U.S. scholarship program.
Yeah.
And I think we send 2 drivers over to the Formula Ford Festival every year, and some of them have had really great success and gone on from there. Joseph Newgarden went, and I think he won one of the big races, and then came back, and now he's in IndyCar. And there's been several drivers that have gone on to careers out of that opportunity. Is there a similar program in Canada?
Yes, there is. It's a little different. Like, it's not as big as America because it's just starting. I think it started last year. And the funniest part is I got invited to it, so I signed up for it and did all that stuff. And then I was kind of confused that I was like, they didn't really take me. And I was like, okay. I think they took 6 other drivers, 1 other girl, and they did a Formula 1600 shootout to see who's fastest or something, and then the guy that wins that does the Formula Ford Festival.
Got it. Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't remember if they actually went to the Formula Ford Festival. I'm really not sure what happened after that, but
Sure.
It's not as big as here in the U.S. I know a guy that did it here in the U.S. Do you know Mackay Stevens?
I am familiar. Yes.
Yeah, he's doing SRO. Yeah, he did the scholarship thing here.
Right.
Yeah,
So we had another guest on the show a while back who you may have met when you were racing at Buttonwillow, and that's Austin Varco.
Okay.
and
Yeah.
and he decided just to go on vacation to England and went racing at Silverstone and I think Brands Hatch. And he mentioned how actually easy it was. Let's put the money part aside.
Yeah.
To get your FIA license, which you now I'm sure you have because you went to race in India, so you've got
Yeah.
that part out of the way. But he just called up a couple of teams in England and said, "I'm coming over and I'd like to rent a ride." And he did it
Yeah.
in their version of Spec Miata. But Formula Ford, as I'm sure you know, is just ginormous in England. I can't imagine that if you could put a little
Yeah.
budget together, even to do a couple of weekends, you might get noticed and that kind of thing. So, but it's always about the budget.
Oh yeah. It is really important. Like, you know, I don't want to say this right now, but I can, if I put a budget together, I can go to Indy Lights. Well, I guess they call it now Indy NXT.
Yeah,
So
whatever crazy
I
name
can
they
go
came
there
up with.
next year if I get a budget together. And the budget is so crazy. Like just trying to find the money and all that stuff. And Europe is actually very, like you said, it's easy. Like to find a team. Like there's so many teams that want drivers. Like they're
Right.
looking for them. They're looking for young drivers as well. And because they're actually struggling to get good drivers, and they, yeah, it's easy to get into a team there. But in America, it's hard, honestly.
Sure.
But,
Sure. I think there's a lot less opportunities here
yes,
than there are in Europe as far as even the lower level series. There's just a huge number of different, Formula Ford, F2, F3, Formula Renault, and probably Formula Vauxhall. I mean, there's just a bunch that I probably can't even name. And they're all looking for drivers, and if you have the license and you've got the check, they'll put you in the car. So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
we don't have as many of those opportunities here, I don't think, in North America as they do over there. So
Yeah,
we talked a little bit about having, young girls come up and want to kind of talk to you and look up to you. I ran across something when I was doing research for this little podcast, and it was you sitting next to a guy who I think a lot of our viewers and listeners would know, and that was Lewis Hamilton. And
yeah.
you had it was a sit down kind of interview situation where they were talking to you and talking to him. First of all, how did that come about?
So because of that documentary
Right.
that was filmed, Mercedes-Benz Canada invited me to go to the Montreal F1 Grand Prix last year, and they set up a whole thing that we'd be in their hospitality and all that stuff, and their suites and stuff, and then they set up an interview with me and Lewis Hamilton on TSN, which is like ESPN here.
Right.
And so so the interview was planned for 30 minutes, and it turned into 1 hour.
Very
Um,
cool.
and we just kept chatting. There was so much, like, because his dad was actually there in the room with us, and we really connected with our dads, and we talked about. I actually mentioned that my parents drive for 24 hours straight to go down here to California from Canada, and that they do it straight. So they switch every 3 hours. They just switch. And then he was like, "Holy cow! Like that is crazy determination from your parents." And because in Europe it's really close. He's
Right.
not used to hearing that far and all that stuff. And it was a really good conversation about like racing, and because he's at the kind of, I wouldn't say the end of his career, but like near it, and he just wants to help younger drivers and new drivers, I guess. And it was nice to hear all the things he had to say. So it was a great conversation.
So, what was it like when you walk into that room, you shake his hand, whatever the first interaction is? Starstruck a little?
Yes, I was in shock. Like I don't know, at the moment when I do things at the moment, I don't really realize what I'm doing and what there is in front of me until after, and then I get really shocked. I'm like, what just happened? And so he walked in the room. We were in the hospitality suite, the Mercedes Benz one, and he walked in the room. I got up to shake his hand. I almost tripped on like all the wires possible because there are all the microphones.
Right.
Yeah, I almost tripped, and yeah, it was funny, but it was I was definitely shocked, like, to see him, and I was like, is that actually him? Like, that's what he actually looks like in person, up close.
Right.
But it was really cool.
So you sat with him for an hour. There was a host interviewing the two of you. What was your big takeaway from that? I know you guys talked about everything from getting started to
Yeah,
nutrition and working out. There was just a ton of it was a really I watched the whole. I think they only posted a half hour.
yeah.
They probably edited it down, but I saw the whole half hour, and I'm a little Lewis Hamilton fanboy, by the way, so that was cool as well. But what was your big takeaway from that conversation?
I would say, like, how much I was really impressed and, like, surprised how much he wants to support women in racing. Like, he mentioned, he was like, that their team is actually growing with women. They're trying to get more women working for them, like, data and all these things. Like, and I was like, that's really cool. Like, because he mentioned that, like, Red Bull or Ferrari, they don't have many women. Like, I don't know about now, but, like, back then they didn't have many women working there and, like, supporting. But just hearing that from him, and hearing, I guess I asked how to improve, or what. I asked something like that, and he said just to work hard and stay determined, and you gotta keep going, just don't give up, basically. So
Yep.
no, I took that away, and I think it was just, at the end of the day, really good to talk to him. Got really good connections, and yeah, it was a really cool interview.
All right. Do you have
Get
his
to
Do
meet
you
him.
have his phone number in your phone?
Yeah, you want
No? Well,
it?
yes,
No,
I absolutely do want it. I wasn't expecting you to give it to me. I just want to know that he gave you the digits so that you can keep picking his brain.
no,
And
no. I wish I had his number.
too cool, too cool. Um, so as we get ready to kind of wrap up here, I'm sure a lot of people are involved in helping you do what you're doing. This is your shot to thank everybody, and don't forget to thank mom and dad. But to thank your sponsors and whoever else is helping you. This is your shot.
Honestly, I gotta thank my mom and dad first. They're there every second, and they're doing the most. Like, I look at my coaches and stuff, and I'm like really happy to have them there and all that stuff. But I still see, like, my parents are more determined. They just want it for me, and they're doing so much. Like, they're driving 24 hours at a time, and in the heat. It's not warm here, and so I'd like to thank them a lot. And of course, my sponsors. I got Faro, which is a brokerage company, Colonial Countertops, Valley Kitchens, and Fast Time Amusements, and my coaches as well. And everyone that supports me, honestly. There's so many people. Of course, family, I would say, is number one. So,
Cool, cool. Um, is mom and dad in the room there with you?
no, they're actually
So
working on the car right now.
so you didn't even have to say that, and you said it.
Yes, I would always say I wouldn't be here without them. They're partially my sponsors, so
That's
they're very important people.
absolutely cool. Absolutely cool. Um, I know you've got the whole F3 Americas that you're going to try to do next year. Um, how about with any SCCA stuff involved with that?
Yeah, for sure. We're trying to do a lot of SCCA, since Buttonwillow is our home track. We just do anything. We just take the car to the garage. So yes, anything that's close by.
It is hardcore, folks, when your home track is a 24-hour motorhome drive from home.
Yeah.
That's that's a big deal. So, Nicole, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Just such an impressive person, young person, old person. Just you've got everything together. I've seen you drive, and your future is very, very bright. Hopefully, you will find the right people to give you the right opportunities. Please keep me posted on what's going on. Shoot me an email so I can update folks. When you've got fun stuff to talk about, we'll get you back on the podcast and keep in touch. How's that?
For sure. Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I've got another guest coming on here. Someone who, if you pay attention to our podcast network, you will know. We'll have that all coming up next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, that didn't take long. We're back on Inside the SCCA. Brian Bielanski here. Let me take those graphics down. Joining me now is Kerry Rouse. He is coming to us from somewhere. Kerry, you're like, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Because every time I look up, you are in a different spot. Where are you sitting tonight in the Driven to Compete world headquarters?
Yeah, in the mobile communication center here. I am at Bristol Motor Speedway in one of the 700 lots they have here. And I'm surrounded by, at the moment, a bunch of pro solo competitors in the SCCA. By tomorrow or Friday, added to that list will be just solo competitors, not pro solo competitors for
Right.
the SCCA. And then Thursday, maybe tomorrow, we're going to start having drag race fans and racers coming in, because there's a drag strip here,
Right.
and our parking lot's essentially connected to that as well. So yeah, I'm going to be around a lot of fans here in Bristol, Tennessee.
So is that, not that I don't want to talk about the SCCA event, but is the drag race, is that like an NHRA, like a big NHRA event, or is it just one of their local drag events?
It's a big one. My understanding is, so there's a there's a term, I think it's called like brake pedal or something like that type of drag racing,
Okay.
and it's only with cars with doors, so it's not the big
Sure.
open wheel dragsters.
Right.
But this is supposed to be the largest of its type in the world tomorrow, starting Thursday.
Wow.
So hundreds and hundreds of vehicles are going to be here competing. About 900, I think.
And the SCCA is doing their autocross solo stuff right in the same area. So
Yeah,
there's a,
yeah. We'll have the sound of engines from both sides.
I've always thought one of the things that the SCCA should look into doing as much as possible is finding events and partnering with maybe other organizations so that our events kind of run alongside with some other people's events. A great opportunity for people to discover us who might not know what we do and what we're doing. So this is a perfect example of something like that.
Yeah. There may be fans from the drag racing that come down and check out the autocross, and then vice versa as well. I'll be doing both. So
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the event that you've got going on. The SCCA event. There's a pro solo and a solo.
yep.
For those who don't know the difference, fill us in.
Yep. So for the pro solo, which is going to be happening over the next 2 days, is a situation where you have two cars taking on a course at the exact same time, and they're supposed to be mirrors of each other. Sometimes they're not perfect mirrors, but the way that they make it fair is you line up, there's a Christmas tree that lights up, and you can't go too early, otherwise your run doesn't count. So, but obviously the faster you are to that tree lighting up and being right on the dot, and you do the whole course,
Right.
and then come back to the beginning in swapped positions. And so you end up you're doing each side 3 times over a period of about a day and a half.
Right.
And so you flip flop, and the way that they calculate your winning time is they take your best time on the left and your best time on the right, regardless of what day it happens, add them together, and that's what you're playing with. And there's a class competition, so there's within your class you can win your class.
Sure.
But then at the end there's bracketing where they take, I think there's one for women, and there's one that's a random draw, and then there's one where the 32 fastest cars, regardless of class, are put head to head in an elimination type of format, right, so you have a single winner. Now, even though you kind of have bragging rights and you've won certain things along the way during competition, all the competitors are really looking for points.
Got it.
And those points will be added together throughout the season, the points that you've earned during the national championships, which you also get points there. And then you're going to have an overall winner for, based upon points at that point.
Right. So I guess you probably couldn't have picked a better event to be next door to than a drag race, because essentially Pro Solo is a drag race with left and right turns.
Yeah, it's if you think about that compared to just a regular solo event, which is going to be happening Saturday and Sunday, you also have a total of 6 runs total, but they have 2 different configurations of the track. So you do 3 runs on one configuration. The next day they change the track, and sometimes it just means going backwards, which is a different track, and you run it 3 times. And then you add all those times together. So you don't want to DNF. You want to make sure that you add all those times together. And that's going to be your time, and that's what you're judged on. And it's kind of like a winner take all format. But yeah, you're out there by yourself. Right. But with the Pro Solo, you can see out of the corner of your eye, they're going to be at the right spot. When you cross that finish line, they should be close, and you want to beat that person across the finish line. So it's that added sense of competition, and then also just the added skill and pressure associated with that Christmas tree, because you want to be quick, but if you're too quick, you're disqualified for that run.
Right. And it's kind of interesting because, most solos are one course for the weekend. And with the Pro Solo, they're mirror courses, but it's when you're going right on the first course, you're going left on the second course, and it's almost having to learn. Well, it is having to learn a different way to do it, and that's kind of an interesting challenge as well.
Yeah, both of them kind of have. The Pro Solo, you're going to have a left and a right. And yes, it's a different course because it's a mirror.
Right.
And so you'll have, but they don't change it. Like once they set up the mirrored courses, they don't change it for the time. Whereas in the solo event, they have the option of completely changing it from one to the other. And my understanding is you really only get to walk the track for each of the new configurations for the regular solo event, and you can also walk for the Pro Solo, but it's not because it's not changing. Then typically the second day you'll see a lot better times from folks.
Right. Well, that's a couple reasons for that. One, because there's rubber down on the track. That's usually very helpful. But you've also been through the course a couple of times, so that's pretty common. So that's pretty cool. So we're going to have you on another podcast here in a couple of weeks to really dig deep into Driven to Compete, which for folks who are friends of the show here, and for folks who are listening on the Racingwire Podcast Network, not on the YouTube channel, the Driven to Compete is now one of our offerings on the podcast channel, along with the Women's Motorsports Network's podcast as well. I'm really happy to have both you and Melinda as part of the team now, and that's pretty cool. And since you do some of your stuff at SCCA events, we're going to bring you on whenever it makes sense if you're at an event, to kind of give us be my roving reporter on scene and do that. So we're going to do that. Where is the next time we're going to connect? I know we set the date already. I just don't remember where it's going to be.
The next SCCA event, I believe, is going to be the Ozarks.
Okay.
It's
2 weeks away, I think, right?
Yeah, it's about 2 weeks away.
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks away. So we'll do that. And that we're going to do a whole podcast about Driven to Compete, how you got involved. And for those who might not know, Carrie is a B-Spec driver, taking a season of B-Spec off. Do you think you're coming back to B-Spec next year?
Well, it all depends on money.
Sure.
And and I will absolutely be back if all that lines up.
Cool.
I love Racing B-Spec. I love the community.
So if you want more of this content, listen to Driven to Compete, and I will also put in the show notes the link to the YouTube channel, just like we do here now. Kerry does his shows both video and audio, and we'll get you links to both of those here in the show notes, so you can check him out as well. Kerry, have fun. Don't be too hot in Bristol. I know Bristol this time of year can be a little humid. Enjoy it, and we'll connect in a couple weeks.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate it.
All right, that's going to do it for another episode of Inside the SCCA. If you like what you see or what you've heard, subscribe to our YouTube channel or subscribe to the Racingwire Podcast Network. We have new episodes every Wednesday on YouTube and every Friday on the Podcast Network. It'd also be great if you leave a comment, especially if it's a good one. If not, go put a comment on someone else's page. Our socials, it's Racingwire Net on Twitter. You can check us out there. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a fantastic weekend. Stay safe and go play with cars.
Hi, I'm Dorsey Schrader, and this is Inside the SCCA.
Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the Racingwire Podcast Network and Rural 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guests, and not that of the SCCA.